Well, ladies and gentlemen, today you are in for a treat because I am joined in Poland by a man called Royal Silk, or Mr. Silk, the mysterious Mr. Silk. He is a gentleman that I met a few months ago. He now works with Team Tusk, James Tusk's team, and obviously we're collaborating on this video now, and all-round great guy. But the reason that I brought him on today is because he is a conversation expert, okay? And what we're going to be talking about in this video is how to communicate with women in a way that's effective, will build deep rapport and attraction, and quite frankly will get you much better results in dating than probably you've ever had before. So great to see you, Mr. Silk. Very nice to see you again. We're in your hometown of Gdynia, and yeah, maybe you could just tell them a bit about yourself and how you came into this area of knowledge.
Okay, Troy, thanks for having me on your channel. I'm really honored to be here. And I'm honored, yes, and I'm honored to have you here as well. I'm glad that you came. So, about me, I have a background in communication and behavioralism, and that is mainly from the academic side.
Yeah.
That I know that a certain field have taken and made it practical,
yes,
but not in the dating scene.
Right.
So
right.
what I find out is that many of the academic behavioralism and communication theory that is out there can be made practical even for the dating scene.
Yeah.
And I think that can give a massive value to people that have problem with conversation and how to make the conversation go forward.
Yeah, exactly. So you studied, what would you say, behavioralism or
communication? I have a
communication.
Master of communication, and that is I have a master of communication and corporate communication. And within that study, it involves lots of behavioralism, behavioral science, science of people, and why we act as we do, and specifically neuroscience. Like, what is it that actually makes us release certain chemical in the brains that is actually connected with attraction, that is connected with love feelings, falling in love with someone, and those kind of things, and that area I've been studying a lot.
Nice.
A lot.
Nice. So you were studying this stuff, just to be clear, not because you wanted to get better with women as such, although maybe there's an element of that, but you were studying this because this is a science that is used by people in business, by people in psychology, of course, but by people in politics and just any form of public communication, I suppose. But what we're doing here specifically is saying, okay, so how can these same principles be applied in dating to get better results? And I mean, you were saying to me earlier before we came on camera, I mean, really, apart from approaching, the number one problem that guys have with girls, with women, is, okay, what do I say? And then what do I say next? And you were saying, really, I mean, this is an area that it's almost untapped, really, in terms of instructional videos of actually telling guys what to say and the reasons why they need to do certain things to pull certain triggers, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's not until today where the society have structured, somewhat small programs for businesses or other professions to be better in communication in their field. I mean, if we just look back 5 years or 10 years back in time, I mean, it was like huge investment from the corporate side to gain that kind of information, specifically if it's going to be practical.
Yeah.
You see, so it's not until today where we can actually use, theory and make it into practice, even in the dating scene. And I take a huge interest in that part for sure, because I mean, how we communicate, specifically with the goal, specifically when we go on dates, we want to communicate in a way that leads to connection.
Yeah.
Because our default is to communicate based on exchange of information.
Yeah.
And that doesn't lead anywhere.
You mean the male way?
Yeah, the male way. Or basically, men and women are different in communication, but not as different as people think always. Yeah. So that is basically for everyone, but more so for males.
Okay.
More so for males.
Yes.
So we want to get into the conversation that leads to connection.
Yes.
The emotional part of the brain, they get triggered when we communicate in a certain way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what would you say, because one objection off the bat that people might have when you're using this kind of language is we've always been told by the dating community, by people giving game advice, it's all about polarity, it's all about creating attraction. So it's man to woman, so you go in there, you're very sort of polarizing. Words like empathy and understanding and so on, they don't tend to get used so much because it's seen as being antithetical to creating attraction. How would you respond to that?
First of all, I don't think that dating community knows exactly what empathy means, to start with.
Okay.
And to understand what empathy means, you really have to deep dive into this one. Because when it comes to the old style of, you know, qualify the girl and create a comfort with the girl after the attraction phase, for example, they are not built in the same way. The conversation is not built in the same way. Okay. And when people are saying like, oh, asking a question takes energy from the girl, it takes attraction, it takes away the attraction, is because it's surface level based questions.
Yes.
Always. So it's just a completely different category, I have to say. So I understand that, you know, asking too many questions will actually lead to failure, because there is nothing behind those questions, and that is the main part. There is nothing empathetic about this.
Yeah, because what we're talking about, I suppose the key sin really is you go up to a woman that you're attracted to, you say, hey, I saw you look really nice, or you look cute, or whatever you're going to say, and then you go, so where are you from? What work do you do? How long have you done that for? Do you enjoy it? Why are you doing that? You know, very, very surface level, bang, bang. How do you get into work? How's your 401k? You know, that kind of thing. Like machine gunning questions is obviously a cardinal sin, and we're not recommending that. But there was something, particularly with the London day game model a few years ago, it was very much frowned upon to ask questions within the first so many minutes. It was like, don't ask questions, make statements. What you're actually proposing is something different to that. Actually, we can ask questions, but we're asking questions in a certain way in order to elicit a sort of deeper emotional connection.
Absolutely. So the thing with question is not like exchange of information questions based. So even though you ask a question, it should be focused on the why she's doing a certain thing, why she thinks in a certain way. And that is very, very important, because it's not until you're asking questions that goes under the surface where when it's not until that time when those beautifully chemical reactions in the brain start working. So if you start asking a surface-based question and then make another surface-based question and then a third surface-based question, I mean, it will not create any dopamine spikes at all, basically, and it will just fail. However, if you will be in the area where you will be able to make her explain to you what she thinks about things and why she thinks about those things, that is when something happens in the brain. Those chemical reactions is actually connected with romance, sex, and bonding, basically. It leads to connection.
So just to be clear with viewers, what we're talking about here, if you can get this stuff mastered, this is going to make it more likely for you to get dates and basically more likely for you to get intimate after those dates, right?
Absolutely. This is quite comprehensive, but it's definitely quite easy to learn if you have a structured plan, if you have a framework to go for. So, I mean, and within this field is what I used to call empathetic listening. So you have to have reflective listening and empathetic listening in order to achieve that. And
you can define those.
I can definitely define those. So to start with is once she start talking about what she thinks about things. So one of my favorite, for example, if I'm hearing Gdynia, is to ask the question like, what do you think about Gdynia? You see? And that is like a setup question.
So how would you just take it to the beginning? So how would you? So you approach the girl, and then what do you say? You might just say a normal kind of thing, like, "Oh, you look pretty."
Okay, so for example, like this is my go-on approach, and it worked beautifully. So in general, I just go and say, "Excuse me. I know this is really spontaneous, but I think you look really nice, and I had to come and say hi. My name is Michael," and she might say, "Oh, my name is Vanessa." And I say, "Oh, nice to meet you, Vanessa. So, Vanessa, are you from here?" She either say yes or no. And if she say yes, okay, so Vanessa, what do you think about Gdynia? And I wait. That question make her think about what she actually thinks about Gdynia. And whatever she answers are using something I call seek clarification. Because she's probably going to say something like, I think it's beautiful, it's nice, and it's close to the beach.
Yeah.
And now suddenly you have something what I used to call cues, threads or cues.
Okay.
So she said beach, she said Gdynia is beautiful and exciting or something like that. And then I'm seeking clarification on one of those topics. So for example, like beautiful, I will ask her directly, like, okay, but what do you actually mean with beautiful?
Yeah.
And now something happens in her brain. She starts thinking about what beautiful means for her.
Right.
And that is when you go, under the surface of conversation in general. And you want to keep her talking about things that is under the surface, because the more she's talking about things that is under the surface, the more you keeping the dopamine and oxytocin and endorphins level high up, in order to actually come into a point when she really connects with you.
Okay.
But in order to make it more stronger, it is very necessary to use something I call reflective listening.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure, I can go on with what that means as well.
Yeah. So define what reflective listening means for us.
Okay, so when she says, for example, like, I love Gdynia because it's beautiful, it's close to the sea, and it's exciting. And I will go on and say, like, okay, but what does it actually means with beautiful? What do you mean? She might say, like, oh, I think it's beautiful because the cafeteria is close to the beach, and the restaurant is in the proximity of the main street, which is also very beautiful, and I just love it. The reflective listening part is different ways actually, but one of my favorite is actually to clarify what I'm hearing in a summary way. So I would reply and say, like, okay, so if I understand you correctly, you think that Gdynia is beautiful because you have the beach, you have the cafeteria close to the beach, and you love the main street.
Right.
Did I understand you correctly? And if she does, which you hopefully do, she will say, that's right, that's exactly what I mean. Now you're creating something that is very powerful between you and the girl, actually. You understood her in a level that she never been understood before, because this is really not mainstream.
So even just saying, what is it that you like about Gdynia, or say Gdansk, or wherever you are, and she says, well, I like A, B, C, and you say, okay, right, so I get it. So what you're saying is you like A, B, and C, but maybe you say it slightly differently. And that in itself, even though that's a relatively simple thing, that in itself is creating a feeling of bonds between you guys.
Definitely, because many guys expect her to believe that you were listening. Right. But it in an unconscious level, is not very obvious for her.
Right.
Also unconsciously. So in order to give a true impression that you really are empathetic towards her, you have to use those reflective listening skills to make you really understand that you're listening. Right. That is so important, and that tactic is using not only in the field of dating, we're talking about in the field of negotiation, we're talking in the field of politics, and those major areas of the industry. Okay. And everyone cannot emphasize enough how important it is to use reflective listening skills and reflect on what that person is saying, in order to make that person really understand that I understand.
Yeah, and sales as well.
Sales for sure, absolutely. The corporate, the area of corporations for sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Just to throw in a devil's advocate point though, what would you say if somebody said, okay, but cockiness and aloofness could be seen to be attractive. Mm-hmm. So if you're in front of this woman and you are making it very clear that you're really, really listening, you're really, really taking everything in, could that almost be counter to the sort of cocky, arrogant, aloof guy that theoretically she craves, who is sort of, what would you say to that as an objection?
If you want to be cocky, if you want to be that kind of alpha male behavior towards the girl, you have to be built on something. Right. I mean, because what people actually mixing up empathy with is compassion. Yeah. It's not the same thing. The only thing empathy is that you understand her world based on her shoes. So her world from her shoes, basically.
Okay.
So that is what empathy means. It doesn't mean that you agree with everything. It doesn't mean that you agree at all. And then just imagine you being cocky about something she said. For example, like, okay, so you love Gdynia and you live here because of the beach. But, so I understand that. But Gdynia beach is quite ugly and it's quite small. How can you like that? That is a sort of cockiness that is connected with something that means for her. So that is much more powerful than you trying to make cockiness out of thin air based on superficial things.
Okay, well so that's really interesting. So you can still be the sort of, you know, slightly aloof kind of cocky kind of character if you want, but it needs to be grounded on really sort of understanding her. Really,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's interesting.
Based on her shoes. Based on her shoes. And another thing I can say is also like seeking clarification is also very important, because if you're going too fast with the reflective summary, it can come across like, oh, but this is like a summary that comes too fast. So for example, like, what do you think about Gdynia? Oh, I think it's beautiful, I think it's exciting, and I think it's great because the beach is close. Then it's very important to seek clarification about those three things, because you don't know anything about her just because she thinks Gdynia beautiful, she thinks Gdynia exciting, she thinks you know, the beach is quite cool, but that is nothing more than just exchange of information. The more important is why she likes the beach, and why she thinks it's beautiful, and why she thinks is exciting. And one of the great questions to ask is, what does exciting means for you? Can you help me to understand that one better? And that is what I call seek clarification or request clarification, because that is the true way of actually learn to know someone, to seek that clarification. Because most people, when they communicate, is just accept what she said and move on. So what did she actually said? The only thing she said was like she liked Gdynia because it's exciting and beautiful, but it doesn't mean anything. We have to go to the meaning part of it. And when we are talking about deep talks, people are misunderstanding deep talks with like emotion and feelings in general.
Trauma.
Like
trauma.
Yeah, like some kind of a psychotherapist way of asking how they feel about things. We're not talking about feeling in that sense. It's much more about, what is it that you like about Gdynia? What is it that you like? And then when she says something, it's more like, okay, but I don't know what your perspective of beautiful is. Can you help me understand that better?
Okay.
And I don't need to like emphasize it in a strong feeling way. It's enough to ask a normal question about this. So like I'm doing with you now. It's like, okay, so can you help me understand beautiful a little bit more? Because your perspective of beautiful might be different from my one. I'm curious. And that kind of thing. And that is enough. That is really enough to get under the really deep, also deep under the surface of a conversation. They mean something for her and for yourself as well, for sure.
Well, what if she then says, well, beauty to me means it looks attractive, but also it makes me reminds me of, I don't know, a time in the past or something like that. Like, I'm not trying to take this too deep now, but so say she says it's partly about it looks aesthetically attractive, and it also makes me, it evokes happiness in me. What do you then do? Do you then go further with that, or do you then branch off to something else?
One of the most important things here is you have to relate to her answers. So you're not the one, even though the questions are very powerful and get under the surface, you still have to relate yourself towards her. So I would say like, okay, I can definitely see what you think is beautiful with Gdynia. I mean, me myself think Gdynia is beautiful because everything is within proximity in a very aesthetic, pleasing way for me. I mean, the beach, the restaurant, the cafeteria, it's just like mind-blowing for me. That's why I like Gdynia so much. But back to you, if I understand you correctly, you really like Gdynia not only because of the cafeteria and the beach and the restaurants. It's also because you have some kind of a memory of the city, of events that is important for you.